The day Rebecca Foster watched her mother stumble out of their canvas tent at dawn with the blue calico dress bundled under her arm. She knew exactly where the woman was headed and what she intended to do with the only decent piece of clothing her daughter owned. The year was 1881, and Riverside, California, had grown from a dusty collection of tents and ramshackle buildings into something resembling a proper town, though poverty and desperation still clung to its edges like the persistent dust that coated everything in sight. Rebecca had turned 19 just 3 weeks prior, and that dress represented every sacrifice she had made over the past 2 years, every extra hour she had worked scrubbing floors at the boarding house, every meal she had skipped to save the money. Now, her mother was going to trade it for whiskey at Miller's saloon, and there was nothing Rebecca could do to stop her. She did not chase after her mother, because she had learned long ago that reasoning with Martha Foster, when the thirst was upon her, was like trying to hold water in your bare hands. Instead, Rebecca sat on the hard ground outside their tent and let the tears come silently, her threadbare cotton shift doing little to protect her from the morning chill. Her father had died 4 years ago in a mining accident up north, and her mother had been drowning herself in liquor ever since, leaving Rebecca to keep them both alive through whatever work she could find. The blue dress had been her hope for something better, a chance to attend the church socials where respectable young women met respectable young men, a ticket out of this hand-to-mouth existence that was wearing her down to nothing. By noon, her mother had not returned, which meant she was passed out somewhere or drinking away whatever remained of the money Miller had given her for the dress. Rebecca forced herself to stand and walk to the boarding house where Mrs. Chen needed help with the laundry. Her hands were raw and cracked from the lye soap, but the work paid 20 cents a day, and she could not afford to miss it. She wore her only other dress, a faded gray thing that had been patched so many times it was more patches than original fabric, and she kept her head down as she walked through town, not wanting to see the pity in anyone's eyes. The boarding house sat on the edge of Riverside's Main Street, a 2-story wooden structure that Mrs. Chen ran with efficiency and surprising kindness. The older Chinese woman had come to California during the gold rush days and had managed to build something solid for herself, despite all the prejudice and hatred she faced. She took one look at Rebecca's swollen eyes and immediately put a cup of strong tea in her hands before pointing to the pile of linens that needed washing. "You drink first," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "Then work. Cannot work with broken heart and empty stomach." Rebecca wanted to protest that she was fine, but the kindness broke something inside her, and she found herself telling Mrs. Chen everything while her tears dripped into the tea. The older woman listened without interruption, her weathered face creased with sympathy and understanding. "Mothers are not always what we need them to be," Mrs. Chen said quietly when Rebecca finished. "But you are strong. You survive this. You survive much worse, I think, before your life gets better." Rebecca wanted to believe her, but at that moment, sitting in the hot laundry room with her ruined hands and her ruined dress somewhere in Miller's saloon, she could not imagine how life would ever improve. She finished her tea and threw herself into the work, scrubbing sheets until her shoulders ached and her fingers bled, trying to wash away the anger and disappointment along with the dirt. She did not know that a tall cowboy named Kieran Xavier had walked into Miller's saloon that morning and seen Martha Foster trading a beautiful blue dress for 2 bottles of cheap whiskey. He did not know Martha, and he did not know Rebecca, but something about the transaction had bothered him enough that he asked Miller about it after the drunken woman had stumbled out. "That woman's daughter saved for near 2 years to buy that dress," Miller said, wiping down the bar with a rag that had seen better days. Works herself to the bone while her mama drinks away everything they got. Shame, really. The girl's decent and kind, not that it matters much in this world. Kieran had been passing through Riverside on his way to his brother's ranch in San Bernardino, but Miller's words had lodged themselves in his mind like a splinter. He was 26 years old and had spent the last 8 years working cattle drives and ranch jobs up and down California, saving his money and learning everything he could about running stock. His brother had offered him a partnership, and Kieran was finally in a position to build something permanent instead of drifting from job to job. He had seen plenty of hardship and injustice in his travels, and usually he kept his head down and minded his own business, but something about this situation would not let him go. He bought the dress from Miller for $3, twice what the saloon keeper had given Martha Foster for it, and then he asked where he could find the daughter. Miller gave him directions to the boarding house, though he warned Kieran that the girl was proud and might not take charity kindly. The sun was starting its descent toward the horizon when Kieran walked up to the boarding house with the blue dress wrapped in brown paper under his arm. "Mrs." Chen answered his knock and looked him up and down with the sharp assessment of someone who had learned to judge character quickly and accurately. "I am looking for Miss Rebecca Foster," Kieran said, removing his hat. "I have something that belongs to her, Mrs." Chen's eyes dropped to the package and her expression shifted to understanding. She made him wait on the porch while she went to fetch Rebecca, and Kieran used the time to wonder if he was making a fool of himself. He had never been the type to play hero, and he had certainly never bought clothing for a woman he had never met. His mother would have said he was being presumptuous and inappropriate, but his mother was 2,000 miles away in Texas, and he was here, holding a dress that represented 2 years of someone's life. When Rebecca came to the door, Kieran forgot whatever speech he had been preparing. She was beautiful in the way that wildflowers were beautiful, unpretentious and resilient, despite the harsh conditions. Her dark hair was coming loose from its bun, and her gray dress was damp with wash water, but her eyes were the clearest green he had ever seen, even red-rimmed from crying as they were. She looked at him with confusion and wariness, clearly having no idea who he was or what he wanted. "Miss Foster," he said, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. "My name is Kieran Xavier. I was at Miller's saloon this morning and I saw your mother trade this dress for whiskey. I bought it back from Miller and I wanted to return it to you." He held out the package, but Rebecca did not take it. Instead, she stared at it like it was a snake that might bite her, and then she looked up at him with something like anger flashing in those green eyes. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "You do not know me. You do not know anything about me or my situation. What gives you the right to interfere?" Kieran had not expected gratitude exactly, but he had not expected hostility either. He kept his hand extended, the package between them like a bridge or a barrier, he could not tell which. "You are right that I do not know you," he said carefully. "And maybe I should have minded my own business. But Miller told me you worked 2 years to buy this dress, and it seemed wrong to let your mother's sickness take that away from you. I am not looking for anything in return. I just thought you should have back what was yours." Rebecca's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for Kieran to track them all. She looked at the package, at his face, at the package again, and then suddenly she was crying, silent tears streaming down her cheeks as she finally reached out and took the dress from his hands. "I do not understand," she whispered. "Nobody does things like this. Nobody helps without wanting something back." "Well, I guess I am nobody then," Kieran said, and he put his hat back on, preparing to leave. He had done what he came to do, and standing here watching this woman cry was making his chest feel tight and strange. "I hope things get better for you, Miss Foster. You deserve that dress and a lot more besides." He was halfway down the porch steps when she called out to him. "Mr. Xavier, wait, please." Kieran turned and found her standing at the top of the steps, clutching the package to her chest like it was made of gold instead of calico. "I am sorry for being rude," Rebecca said, and her voice was steadier now, though the tears were still falling. "You did an incredibly kind thing, and I was hateful to you because I have forgotten that kindness exists in the world. Would you let me thank you properly? Would you come to the church social on Sunday? I would like to see you again, to tell you what this means to me when I am not standing here crying like a fool." Kieran knew he should say no. He was supposed to be at his brother's ranch by Sunday, and he had no business starting anything with a woman whose life was clearly complicated and difficult. But he looked at Rebecca Foster standing there in her patched gray dress, holding onto the blue one like a lifeline, and he found himself nodding. "I will be there," he said. "Sunday, then." He walked back to the hotel where he was staying and wrote a letter to his brother explaining that he would be delayed a few days. He did not mention Rebecca or the dress, because he did not know how to explain something he barely understood himself. All he knew was that he wanted to see her again, wanted to know if those green eyes looked happier when they were not filled with tears, wanted to understand why a woman he had spoken to for 5 minutes felt more important than anything else in his carefully planned life. Sunday morning dawned clear and warm, and Rebecca woke before sunrise to heat water for washing. She had hidden the blue dress in the bottom of her trunk, wrapped in clean muslin to protect it from the dust and her mother's knowledge. Martha had not come home Saturday night, which meant she was either passed out at the saloon or had found some other place to sleep off her binge. Rebecca felt guilty for the relief that washed through her at her mother's absence, but she pushed the guilt away and focused on preparing herself for the social. The dress fit perfectly, the blue calico bringing out the color of her eyes and making her dark hair look richer and shinier than it had any right to look. She had never owned anything so fine, and as she fastened the buttons with trembling fingers, she felt like a different person, someone who deserved good things and happiness and maybe even love. She knew she was being foolish, knew that one dress and one act of kindness did not change the fundamental facts of her life, but for this one morning she wanted to believe in possibilities. Mrs. Chen insisted on walking with her to the church, and the older woman's presence gave Rebecca courage as they made their way through town. People stared at her dress, and Rebecca heard whispers following in her wake, but she kept her head high and her eyes forward. She had done nothing wrong, and she would not act ashamed of looking nice for once in her life. The church social was held in the yard beside the small white chapel that served Riverside's Protestant community. Long tables had been set up under the cottonwood trees, and women were laying out food while men stood in clusters, talking about cattle prices and water rights, and all the things that men seemed to find endlessly fascinating. Rebecca scanned the crowd anxiously, looking for Kieran Xavier and half afraid he would not be there, that his promise had been as empty as so many promises turned out to be. But then she saw him standing near the church steps, looking uncomfortable in a clean white shirt and string tie, his hat in his hands as he talked to Reverend Patterson. He was taller than she remembered, broad-shouldered and lean in the way of men who worked hard for their living, and when he turned and saw her, his whole face changed, lighting up with a smile that made her heart do strange things in her chest. He excused himself from the reverend and walked over to her, and Rebecca was suddenly aware of how many people were watching them. curious about the stranger who was making his way toward Martha Foster's daughter with such obvious intent. "Miss Foster," Kieran said, and the way he said her name made it sound like music. "You look beautiful. That dress is even prettier than I remembered." Rebecca felt heat rise in her cheeks, not used to compliments or the way Kieran was looking at her, like she was the only person in the whole churchyard. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I was afraid you might have moved on, that you might have better things to do than attend a church social with a stranger." "There is nowhere else I would rather be," Kieran said, and the simple honesty in his voice made Rebecca believe him. "Would you introduce me to your friend?" Rebecca turned to Mrs. Chen, who was watching Kieran with that sharp, assessing look she had perfected over the years. "This is Mrs. Chen. She runs the boarding house where I work. She has been very kind to me." Kieran nodded respectfully to the older woman. "Thank you for looking after Miss Foster, madam. It is clear she has a good friend in you." Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly, and she gave Kieran a small nod of approval before turning to Rebecca. "I go help with food. You stay, talk to your cowboy. But remember, people are watching, so you behave proper." She walked away before Rebecca could protest that Kieran was not her cowboy, and then she was alone with him, standing under the cottonwood trees while the social swirled around them. They talked for hours, starting with careful, polite questions and gradually opening up, as they discovered how easy it was to speak to each other. Kieran told her about growing up in Texas, about leaving home at 18 to make his own way, about all the places he had been, and the things he had seen. Rebecca told him about her father, about the good years before he died, about the slow deterioration of her mother and the daily struggle to survive. She did not usually talk about these things because most people either pitied her or judged her, but Kieran did neither. He just listened, really listened, and when she finished he reached out and took her hand. "You are the strongest person I have ever met," he said quietly. "Most people would have given up or run away, but you stayed and you kept fighting. That takes courage." "It does not feel like courage," Rebecca admitted. "Most days it just feels like stubbornness." "Maybe courage and stubbornness are the same thing," Kieran said, and he smiled at her, still holding her hand. "Either way, I am glad you have it. I am glad you are here." They ate lunch together, sitting at the end of one of the long tables, and Rebecca could feel the weight of the town's attention on them. She knew people were talking, knew they were wondering who this stranger was and what he wanted with Martha Foster's daughter, but she found she did not care. For the first time in years, she felt like something good might be about to happen, and she was not going to let gossip or fear ruin it. As the afternoon wore on, Kieran asked if he could call on her properly, and Rebecca said yes without hesitation. They made plans for him to visit on Tuesday evening, and when the social finally ended and it was time to part ways, Kieran squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you for today," he said. "I cannot remember the last time I enjoyed myself this much." "Neither can I," Rebecca admitted, and she meant it with her whole heart. She walked home with Mrs. Chen as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and for the first time in a very long time, Rebecca Foster felt something that might have been hope. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and stolen moments with Kieran. He had delayed his trip to his brother's ranch indefinitely, taking a job at the livery stable to earn money while he courted Rebecca properly. He came to see her every Tuesday and Thursday evening, and they would walk through town or sit on the porch of the boarding house, talking about everything and nothing while Mrs. Chen chaperoned from a discreet distance. Rebecca learned that Kieran loved horses and had a gift for working with difficult animals. He was patient and kind, quick to laugh and slow to anger, and he had dreams of building a ranch that was more than just profitable, a place that treated its workers fairly and its animals humanely. He told her about his brother's operation in San Bernardino, about the partnership that was waiting for him whenever he was ready to claim it. And Rebecca could hear in his voice how much he wanted her to be part of that future. For her part, Rebecca found herself falling in love with surprising speed and intensity. She had always been practical, always focused on survival rather than romance, but Kieran made her want things she had never dared to want before. He made her laugh, made her feel seen and valued, made her believe that she deserved happiness and love and all the good things life had to offer. When he kissed her for the first time, standing under the cottonwood trees where they had met at the church social, Rebecca felt like her whole life had been leading to this moment, to this man, to this feeling of rightness that settled into her bones and made her feel complete. But her mother remained a constant shadow over her newfound happiness. Martha Foster had not improved, had not suddenly become sober and maternal just because her daughter was being courted by a good man. If anything, she had gotten worse, staying away for days at a time and coming home only when she needed money or a place to sleep. Rebecca continued to work at the boarding house and give Mrs. Chen most of her wages for safekeeping, knowing that any money left in the tent would disappear into Miller's cash register within hours. Kieran never pushed Rebecca to talk about her mother, but he made it clear that he was not going anywhere, that Martha's problems did not change how he felt about Rebecca. He was steady and reliable in a way that Rebecca had not known was possible, and she clung to that steadiness like an anchor in a storm. 2 months after they met, Kieran asked Rebecca to marry him. They were sitting by the river that gave Riverside its name, watching the water flow past in the golden evening light, and he pulled a simple gold ring from his pocket and held it out to her with hands that shook slightly. "I know it is fast," he said. "I know we have only known each other a short time, and I know your life is complicated. But I love you, Rebecca Foster, and I cannot imagine my future without you in it. Will you marry me? Will you come to San Bernardino and help me build something good and lasting?" Rebecca looked at the ring, at Kieran's earnest face, at the river flowing endlessly toward the sea, and she knew her answer before she opened her mouth. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." Kieran let out a breath he had been holding and slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he was kissing her, and Rebecca was kissing him back, and the world narrowed down to just the two of them, and the promise they had made to each other. They decided to marry quickly and quietly, not wanting a big production but needing the legal and spiritual binding that would make them husband and wife. Reverend Patterson agreed to perform the ceremony the following Saturday, and Mrs. Chen insisted on hosting a small gathering at the boarding house afterward. Rebecca invited no one else because there was no one else to invite, and Kieran had no family nearby, so it would be just the 4 of them, which suited Rebecca perfectly. The hardest part was telling her mother. Rebecca found Martha at their tent 3 days before the wedding, sober for once but shaking and sick, looking in the way that meant she was between binges. Rebecca sat down across from her and spoke clearly and firmly. "I am getting married on Saturday. His name is Kieran Xavier, and he is a good man. We are moving to San Bernardino where he has a partnership in a ranch. I want you to come with us, Mama. I want you to get help and get better, to have a chance at a real life again." Martha looked at her daughter with eyes that were still beautiful despite the ravages of alcohol and grief. For a moment, Rebecca thought she saw something like regret or longing flash across her mother's face, but then it was gone, replaced by the familiar stubborn blankness. "I am not going anywhere," Martha said flatly. "You go on and marry your cowboy, leave your old mother behind. I always knew you would abandon me eventually." The unfairness of the accusation stole Rebecca's breath. She had sacrificed everything for her mother, had stayed and worked and suffered when she could have left years ago, and now Martha was acting like Rebecca was the one who had failed. "I am not abandoning you," Rebecca said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I am inviting you to come with us to be part of our life, but I am not going to stay here and watch you drink yourself to death. I have to save myself, Mama. I have to have my own life." "Then go have it," Martha said bitterly. "You do not need my permission or my blessing." Rebecca stood up, her throat tight with unshed tears. "I love you, Mama. I will always love you, but I cannot save you if you will not save yourself. The offer stands. If you change your mind, you know where to find me before Saturday." She walked out of the tent and did not look back, and if she heard her mother crying behind her, she told herself it was just the wind. Saturday arrived bright and clear, and Rebecca woke in the small room at the boarding house that Mrs. Chen had given her for the week, wanting Rebecca to have a proper place to prepare for her wedding rather than the canvas tent she shared with her mother. She washed carefully and pinned up her hair, and then she put on the blue calico dress that had started everything. It seemed right to wear it, a symbol of where she had been and where she was going, a reminder that kindness and love could change everything. Mrs. Chen helped her with the buttons and stood back to look at her with satisfaction. "You are beautiful bride," she said firmly. "Your cowboy is very lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Rebecca said softly, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. The ceremony was simple and sweet, held in the chapel with afternoon light streaming through the windows. Kieran wore his best shirt and a new vest he had bought specially for the occasion, and when Rebecca walked down the short aisle toward him, his eyes filled with tears. Reverend Patterson spoke about love and commitment and partnership, and when it came time for them to exchange vows, Rebecca's voice was strong and clear. "I promise to love you and honor you and stand beside you through whatever comes," she said, looking into Kieran's eyes and seeing her whole future there. "I promise to build a life with you that is good and true and full of joy. I promise to be your partner and your friend and your wife from this day forward." Kieran's vows were similar, but he added something that made Rebecca's heart overflow. "I promise to protect you and cherish you and make sure you never have to fight alone again. I promise to give you the life you deserve, full of love and laughter and all the good things I can provide. I promise to be worthy of the gift you have given me by saying yes." When Reverend Patterson pronounced them husband and wife and told Kieran he could kiss his bride, Rebecca felt like she was floating. The kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise, and when they pulled apart, she was smiling so wide her face hurt. The gathering at the boarding house was small but joyful. Mrs. Chen had prepared a feast with help from some of the other women who worked at the boarding house, and there was even a small cake with white frosting. They ate and talked and laughed, and Rebecca kept looking at the gold band on her finger, hardly believing that this was real, that she was actually married to this wonderful man who had walked into her life and changed everything. As the evening drew to a close, there was a commotion at the door. Rebecca's heart sank, thinking it might be her mother come to cause a scene, but when Mrs. Chen opened the door, it was not Martha standing there. Instead, it was Miller from the saloon, looking uncomfortable and holding his hat in his hands. "Mr. Xavier, Miss Foster, I mean Mrs. Xavier," he corrected himself, nodding at Rebecca. "I wanted to come by and offer my congratulations, and I wanted to tell you something that I think you should know." He paused, clearly uncomfortable with whatever he had come to say. Kieran stood up and invited him in, and Miller stepped inside, glancing around at the small gathering before focusing on Rebecca. "Your mother came by the saloon this afternoon," he said. She was sober, which I have not seen in near about 2 years. She asked me if I knew where the wedding was being held, and I told her it was here at the boarding house. But then she just stood there for a long time, not saying anything, and finally she asked me to give you this. He pulled a small package from his coat pocket and handed it to Rebecca. She unwrapped it with shaking hands and found a delicate silver locket on a thin chain. Rebecca recognized it immediately because it had belonged to her grandmother, one of the few family heirlooms they had left. Her mother had refused to sell it even in the worst times, saying it was the one thing she had left of her own mother. Inside the locket were 2 small photographs, one of Rebecca as a baby and one of her father, taken before the mining accident that killed him. There was also a small piece of paper folded tight, and Rebecca opened it to find a note in her mother's shaky handwriting. I am sorry I could not be the mother you deserved. I am sorry I took so much from you and gave so little back. I hope your cowboy treats you right and gives you the life I never could. You are the best thing I ever did, and I love you more than whiskey, even if I never showed it. Be happy, my girl. Be so happy that it makes up for all the sadness. Your loving mother. Rebecca read the note 3 times, tears streaming down her face, and then she handed it to Kieran so he could read it too. He put his arm around her and pulled her close, and she buried her face in his shoulder and cried for her mother, for all the lost years and broken promises, for the love that had always been there but had gotten twisted up in grief and addiction until it was almost unrecognizable. She did not come, Rebecca whispered against Kieran's chest. She could not even come to say goodbye in person. Maybe it was too hard, Kieran said gently. Maybe she thought it would be easier for both of you this way, but she wanted you to know she loves you, Rebecca. She wanted you to have something of hers to take with you. Miller cleared his throat awkwardly. She also paid off her tab at the saloon, every penny she owed me. I do not know where she got the money, but she said she did not want to leave any debts behind. I think maybe she is planning to leave Riverside, start fresh somewhere else. At least, that is what I hope. Rebecca nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She put the locket around her neck and felt the weight of it settle against her heart, a reminder of where she came from and who she was, a connection to her mother and father and the family they had been before everything fell apart. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, and finally it was just Rebecca and Kieran alone in the small room Mrs. Chen had prepared for them. They would leave for San Bernardino in the morning, starting their new life together, but tonight they had this quiet space to simply be husband and wife. Kieran helped Rebecca out of the blue dress, his hands gentle and reverent, and then he held her while she cried out all the grief and relief and hope that had been building inside her. He did not try to fix anything or tell her it would all be fine. He just held her and let her feel what she needed to feel, and that gift of presence and patience was worth more than any words could have been. Later, when the tears had passed and they lay together in the darkness, Rebecca told Kieran about her childhood, about the mother Martha had been before grief destroyed her. She told him about picnics by the river and songs sung at bedtime, about the way her father had looked at her mother like she was the most precious thing in the world. She told him about the mining accident and the telegram that arrived 3 days after it happened, about watching her mother slowly crumble under the weight of loss. I think she loved him so much that she could not survive losing him, Rebecca said quietly. I think she tried to drink herself to death because living without him hurt too much, and I was just a reminder of what she had lost, a ghost haunting her every day. That was not your fault, Kieran said firmly. What happened to your mother was tragic, but it was not your fault, and you did not deserve to be treated that way. You did everything you could to help her, and now you have to let her go and live your own life. That is what she wants for you. That is what anyone who loves you would want." Rebecca knew he was right, but knowing something in your head and accepting it in your heart were two different things. Still, she had Kieran now, had a future that looked bright and full of possibility, and she decided to focus on that rather than the sadness of everything she was leaving behind. They made love for the first time that night, and it was tender and awkward and perfect in the way first times often are. Kieran was patient and careful with her, and Rebecca felt safe in a way she had not felt since before her father died. This was what love was supposed to be, she realized, this partnership and care and mutual devotion. This was what she had been fighting for all along, even when she had not known it. The next morning they loaded their few belongings into the wagon Kieran had purchased and said goodbye to Mrs. Chen and Reverend Patterson. Rebecca looked back at Riverside as they pulled away, at the dusty streets and ramshackle buildings, at the boarding house where she had worked so hard, at the tent she could just barely see in the distance. She thought about her mother and hoped she was somewhere safe, somewhere she could heal and find peace. And then she turned forward, toward San Bernardino and the future she was going to build with her husband. The journey to San Bernardino took 2 days, and they camped under the stars the first night, lying in their bedroll and looking up at the vast sky above them. Kieran pointed out constellations and told her stories about the cattle drives he had been on, about sleeping on the ground for weeks at a time and waking to find coyotes had stolen half the camp's food. Rebecca told him about her dreams for their future, about the children she hoped they would have and the home she wanted to create, a place that was warm and safe and full of laughter. "How many children are you planning on having?" Kieran asked, amusement coloring his voice. "At least 4, Rebecca said decisively. "I was lonely growing up as an only child, especially after Papa died. I want our children to have siblings, to have each other even when times are hard." 4 children, Kieran repeated, pulling her closer against his side. "That is a lot of mouths to feed and a lot of noise in the house." "Are you saying you do not want 4 children?" Rebecca asked, hearing the teasing note in his voice. "I am saying I would give you 10 children if that is what you wanted," Kieran said seriously. "I want whatever makes you happy, Rebecca. Your happiness is my happiness now." They arrived at the ranch on a warm afternoon, and Rebecca got her first look at what would be her new home. It was smaller than she had expected but solidly built, a real house with wooden walls and a shingled roof, not a tent or a shack. There was a barn and a corral and fields stretching out toward the mountains in the distance. Kieran's brother Kenneth came out to greet them, and Rebecca liked him immediately. He had the same easy smile as Kieran and the same honest eyes, and he welcomed Rebecca into the family with genuine warmth. Kenneth's wife had died in childbirth 2 years earlier, and he had been running the ranch alone since then, struggling to keep up with all the work. Having Kieran as a partner would make everything easier, and having Rebecca to help with the house and the cooking and all the domestic work that Kenneth had been doing himself was an unexpected blessing. The first months of marriage were an adjustment for both of them. Rebecca had never run a household before, had never cooked for 3 people or managed a garden or done any of the 100 tasks that ranch life required. But she learned quickly, and what she lacked in experience, she made up for in determination. Kieran worked from dawn to dusk building up the herd and repairing fences, and all the hard physical labor that ranching demanded. But he always came home to Rebecca with a smile, always made time to talk to her and hold her and remind her how much he loved her. Kenneth proved to be a good brother and a good friend, giving them privacy when they needed it, but always available to help or advise when asked. He told Rebecca stories about Kieran as a boy, about the trouble they had gotten into together in Texas, and the dreams they had shared of building something of their own out west. Rebecca could see how much the brothers loved each other, how they worked together with the easy cooperation of people who trusted each other completely, and she felt grateful to be part of this family. By the end of their first year of marriage, the ranch was thriving. They had doubled the size of the herd, planted extensive gardens, and even hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work. Rebecca discovered she had a talent for managing the finances, for keeping track of expenditures and profits in a way that helped them make smart decisions about where to invest their resources. Kieran deferred to her judgment on these matters, trusting her intelligence and business sense, and Rebecca felt proud of the contributions she was making to their partnership. She also discovered she was pregnant, and the joy she felt when she told Kieran was unlike anything she had ever experienced. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing and crying at the same time, and then he set her down carefully as if she might break. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be parents." The pregnancy was easier than Rebecca had feared, and Kieran was attentive and protective without being overbearing. He rubbed her feet when they swelled, brought her tea when she felt nauseous, and talked to her belly every night, telling their unborn child about the ranch and the life they were preparing for them. Their son was born on a spring morning, arriving quickly and with surprisingly little fuss. Rebecca labored for only 6 hours before the midwife placed a squalling, red-faced baby in her arms, and she looked down at him with absolute amazement. He had Kieran's nose and her eyes, and he was the most perfect thing she had ever seen. "What should we name him?" Kieran asked, sitting on the bed beside her and stroking the baby's soft head with one gentle finger. "I want to name him after my father," Rebecca said. Thomas Xavier." "Thomas," Kieran repeated, and he smiled. "It is a good, strong name. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world, son." Parenthood changed them both in ways Rebecca had not anticipated. She had thought she knew what love was, had thought what she felt for Kieran was the deepest emotion she could experience, but the love she felt for Thomas was something else entirely, fierce and protective and all-consuming. Kieran was equally besotted, spending every free moment holding his son and making silly faces to earn baby smiles. Kenneth was a devoted uncle, carving toys and telling stories, and generally spoiling his nephew at every opportunity. The ranch felt full and alive in a way it had not before, and Rebecca often found herself standing in the doorway of their house, looking out at the land they were building and the family they were creating, and feeling almost overwhelmed with gratitude. 2 years later, they had a daughter they named Rose, and 2 years after that another daughter they called Lily. The house was loud and chaotic, and full of the kind of joyful noise Rebecca had dreamed about on that night under the stars during their journey to San Bernardino. Kieran proved to be a patient and loving father, teaching the children to ride and helping them with their chores, and never raising his voice in anger, even when they drove him to distraction. Rebecca had written to her mother several times over the years, addressing the letters to Miller's saloon in Riverside, and hoping they would find their way to Martha, wherever she was. She told her mother about the wedding and the ranch and the births of each grandchild, never expecting a response but needing to reach out anyway, needing Martha to know she was remembered and loved despite everything. 4 years into their marriage, a letter finally arrived. It was postmarked from San Francisco and written in a shaky but sober hand. Martha told Rebecca that she had left Riverside the day after the wedding and had made her way north, looking for work and a fresh start. She had fallen back into drinking several times, but each time she had managed to pull herself out again. And for the past year, she had been completely sober, working as a seamstress and attending meetings with other people trying to overcome their addictions. "I am not asking for forgiveness," Martha wrote. "I know I do not deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I am trying, that I am finally doing the work I should have done years ago. I am proud of you, Rebecca. I am proud of the life you have built and the woman you have become, and I am sorry I was not the mother you needed. If you ever want to see me, I would welcome it, but I understand if you cannot. Just know that I love you and I think about you every day. Your mother." Rebecca read the letter through tears and then handed it to Kieran, who read it silently and then pulled her into his arms. "What do you want to do?" he asked quietly. "Do you want to go see her?" Rebecca thought about it for a long time, weighing her anger and hurt against the tentative hope Martha's letter had sparked. Finally, she nodded. "I think I do. I think I need to see for myself that she is really getting better, that this is not just another false promise. Will you come with me?" "Of course," Kieran said without hesitation. "We will make it a family trip. The children should meet their grandmother, and I think your mother would like to see what a wonderful family you have built." They made the journey to San Francisco that summer, taking all 3 children and Kenneth along to help manage the chaos of traveling with small children. Rebecca was nervous as they approached the address Martha had provided, a boarding house in a respectable part of the city. But when Martha opened the door and saw Rebecca standing there with her family, the older woman's face crumpled with joy and relief. "You came," Martha whispered. "You actually came." "I came," Rebecca confirmed, and then she was hugging her mother, and they were both crying, and years of hurt and anger were not erased, but they were softened, made bearable by this moment of connection and grace. Martha was different, clearer and steadier than Rebecca had seen her in years. She was thinner and older, gray threading through her dark hair, but her eyes were bright and focused. She invited them all inside and made tea, and then she sat on the floor with Thomas and Rose and Lily, asking them questions and listening to their chattering responses with genuine interest and delight. They spent 3 days in San Francisco, and Rebecca watched her mother carefully, looking for signs of deception or relapse, but Martha remained sober and present. On their last evening, the 2 women walked together along the waterfront while Kieran and Kenneth watched the children back at the boarding house. "I am sorry," Martha said again. "I know I have said it before, but I need you to hear it. I am sorry for all the pain I caused you, for all the ways I failed you. You deserved so much better than what I gave you." "I forgive you," Rebecca said, and she was surprised to realize she meant it. "I do not forget what happened, and I do not pretend it did not hurt, but I forgive you, Mama. I can see you are trying, and that matters. That matters so much." They talked about the future, about the possibility of Martha coming to visit the ranch, of building a relationship slowly and carefully, with boundaries and honesty and realistic expectations. It would not be easy, and there would likely be setbacks, but Rebecca felt hopeful in a way she had not felt about her mother in years. When they returned to the ranch, Rebecca felt like something had healed inside her, some old wound finally beginning to close. She threw herself into her life with renewed energy and joy, cherishing her husband and children and the good fortune that had brought her to this place. Over the years, the ranch continued to prosper. They bought more land, built a bigger house, and established a reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing. Kieran and Kenneth were respected in the community, and Rebecca became known for her charitable work, always willing to help families who were struggling the way she had once struggled. Martha did visit, coming to the ranch for a month every summer and building relationships with her grandchildren that were tender and sweet. She was not perfect, and sometimes the old patterns threatened to resurface, but she kept going to her meetings and working her program, and Rebecca was proud of her mother's perseverance and courage. When Thomas turned 16, he told his parents he wanted to study law, not ranching, and while Rebecca worried Kieran might be disappointed that his son did not want to follow in his footsteps, her husband just smiled and said he wanted Thomas to follow his own path, whatever that might be. They sent him to school in Los Angeles, and he came home for holidays full of stories about his studies and his plans for the future. Rose and Lily were horse mad, spending every free moment in the stables and learning everything they could about training and breeding. Kenneth, who had never remarried, took them under his wing and taught them the business side of ranching, and Rebecca watched her daughters flourish under his mentorship. A fourth child arrived when Rebecca was 32, another son they named Marcus, and he completed their family in ways Rebecca had not known were still needed. Kieran was 41 by then, with gray in his hair and laugh lines around his eyes, but he approached fatherhood for the fourth time with the same wonder and enthusiasm he had shown with Thomas. The years passed quickly, filled with the daily joys and challenges of family life. Rebecca and Kieran grew old together, their love deepening and maturing into something solid and unshakable. They fought sometimes, usually about money or how to discipline the children, but they always talked it through and found compromise, never letting anger fester or resentment build. Martha lived to see all her grandchildren grown, passing away peacefully at the age of 70 after 15 years of sobriety. Rebecca grieved for the mother she had lost, and the mother she had found again, grateful for those last years of reconciliation and connection. At the funeral, she wore the silver locket Martha had given her on her wedding day, and she told stories about the good times before her father died, wanting people to remember Martha as more than just her struggles. Kieran remained her constant companion and truest friend through everything, supporting her dreams and sharing her burdens and loving her with a steadiness that never wavered. When their 50th wedding anniversary arrived, the whole family gathered at the ranch to celebrate, children and grandchildren filling the house with noise and laughter. That evening, after everyone else had gone to bed, Rebecca and Kieran sat on the porch together, holding hands and watching the stars come out over the mountains. They were both in their 70s now, and their bodies showed the wear of hard work and long years, but when Rebecca looked at her husband, she still saw the tall cowboy who had walked into Miller's saloon and bought back her blue dress. "You remember the first time we met?" she asked, squeezing his hand gently. "I remember everything about you," Kieran said, lifting her hand to his lips and kissing it softly. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, even in that patched gray dress with your eyes red from crying. I remember deciding right then that I was going to do something, that I could not just walk away and leave you to suffer. Best decision I ever made." "It was the dress," Rebecca said, smiling. "If my mother had not sold my dress and you had not bought it back, we never would have met. I would still be in Riverside, probably alone and bitter, and you would be here with some other woman." "I do not think so," Kieran said thoughtfully. "I think we would have found each other somehow. I think we were meant to be together, dress or no dress. The dress just brought us together sooner." Rebecca leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the weight of 50 years of love and partnership settling around her like a warm blanket. They had built something good here, something that would outlast them both. Their children were happy and successful, their grandchildren healthy and bright, and the ranch they had worked so hard to build was thriving. "I love you," she said simply. "I have loved you since the day you walked onto Mrs. Chen's porch with that package under your arm. I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "And I love you," Kieran replied, his voice rough with emotion. "You are my heart, Rebecca Xavier. You always have been and you always will be." They sat together in the comfortable silence of people who had spent a lifetime together, who knew each other's thoughts and moods and needs without words. The night grew cool around them, and eventually they went inside to their bed, where they had shared 50 years of intimacy and comfort and love. Rebecca fell asleep in Kieran's arms, feeling safe and cherished and deeply, profoundly grateful for the life they had created together. She dreamed of blue dresses and cowboys and small acts of kindness that changed everything. And when she woke in the morning with sunlight streaming through the windows and her husband beside her, she smiled and thanked God for the day her mother sold her only good dress for whiskey, and the cowboy bought her a better one the next day. Their story became a family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren, a reminder that love could bloom in unexpected places, that kindness mattered, that one person's compassion could change the course of another person's entire life. And every time the story was told, Rebecca would pull out the blue calico dress, carefully preserved all these years, and she would remember that long-ago day in Riverside, California, when everything changed, when a stranger walked into her life and offered her not just a dress but hope and love, and a future brighter than anything she had dared to imagine.